All right, so I'm going to go over 1 through 3 here, and we're looking at what are the possible domain and range values of this graph given to us on question number 1. I'm going to talk about domain and range a little bit different. And if I give you an inequality and I tell you x is greater than 2, you know that if you were to graph that on a number line, you would say this would be 1, this would be 2, and this would be 3. And we'd graph an open circle because we're not including number 2, and then we'd shade to the right. So every value of x is greater than 2, okay? So if I look at this function that I'm given here on the graph, and I look at it the same way. So in other words, if I look at this number line, this x-axis, and if I look at that and think about that as being my number line, okay, so this here being 0, this being -1, this being -2, -3. And notice as I'm saying these numbers, I'm hitting that value, I'm hitting that line. If I were to draw the arrow up, I'd be hitting that graph, okay? It'd be -4, and then all the way down here at -5. So I know that x, if I were to graph this on a number line, let me erase that. So if I were to graph this on a number line, okay, we have -4, and then we have -5, and then we have -6, okay? It would be an open circle at -5 because that's an open circle on the graph. That means we're not going to include that value. And our arrow is going towards the right. It's in the right direction, okay, and it's going up. So that means that I would shade to the right of my graph, and it'd be every value of x greater than -5, okay? So my domain, now don't need, this is not a compound inequality because the arrow goes on to infinity. So the domain for this is just x is greater than -5, okay? Now if I were to look at the range, I can do the same thing that I did with the domain, and I can look at the y-axis, all right, and I can look at this. I'm looking at this, and it's just like a normal number line. It's just up and down. So I have 0 here, and then I have -1 here, and then -2, and all the way down. But I only really need to look at -1. Okay, my range, if I were to look at this on the number line, okay, I have -1 here, I have 0 here. Well, if you think about it, the arrow is going off in this direction, right? So that means from this one value, I'm looking at every value of y to the right of that, or really up. I'm saying right, but it's up to that right of that -1, and not including -1 because that's an open line. So that's an open line there, and it's going to the right. So y would be greater than -1. Okay, and this would be my domain and range for this graph. Okay, now the next question says, number 3, in the graph above, would x -6 be a domain value? -6, x is equal to -6 is right there. It's outside of my graph. If you think about it, this is a line, and it's going from -5. Negative x is smaller than -5. It's not greater than -5, it's smaller. So that would definitely not be a domain value. But 6 is greater than -5, so that means 6 would be a domain value, okay? And then question number 3, we can treat it the same way that we did before. So this would be an open circle on my number line, and that would be every value of x to the right. Over here, if I look at the right side, all right, I'd have an open circle here, and then it'd be every value of x to the left. And then I'm looking at the numbers in between. All right, that's -4, so my domain. And I know it's asking for range, but I'm going to go ahead and talk about the domain too. So 1, 2, 3, 4, so that's -4, less than, not equal to, just less than, x less than, our maximum value is 1, 2, 3. Now the range is going to be a little slightly different because if you look at the range, I'm going to go ahead and erase that just so that we have this. This is a solid line right here. So I'm looking at every value to the right of -1. And then up here at the top, I have an open circle and then everything to the below. Okay, so I'm looking at in between negative 1 and 6. So negative 1, y, and 6. Now it's including negative 1, but it's not including negative 6 because that open circle there. Notice it's got that cutout there. All right, that pretty much finishes this up, and I will see you next time.